If you are in the cantina or the cafeteria and you see a coworker and you do not tell them Guten Appetit or Mahlzeit, you have committed some kind of crime.
It's the Germany Experience, the podcast about life in Germany as seen through the eyes of outsiders. I'm your host, Sean. Visit the website, thegermanyexperience.de, and send me an email if you want to talk to me, info@thegermanyexperience.de. In today's episode, I have Alex from the USA as a guest who has some really useful advice for what to do if you're not happy with your job. And she actually has changed jobs a few times, so she's got a bit of experience and some advice and tips about that. But before we get into that, as I mentioned last week, you can now support the podcast by making a small donation if you wanted to. And it's a buy me a coffee, and the link is in the show notes. Or you can go to thegermanyexperience.de/support, and there's the link where you can make a small donation. And I just want to thank, I've got 2 supporters already. And I just want to say thank you to both of them. The one is Josie and the other one is the guest from last week, Jangar. They both made contributions to the show. And I just wanted to say I really appreciate it. Thank you to Josie and Jangar. It means a lot. And as I said last week, any contributions go towards expenses that I need to keep the show going. So thank you very much for your support. And if you like the show and you want to support it in another way, spreading the word about the show is a great idea. So just go onto different Facebook expat groups, for example, share your favorite episode, or just tell someone that you think might need the show in their lives. Maybe a new foreigner in Germany or someone who's planning a move to Germany. Tell them about the podcast, and I would be eternally grateful. Right, my guest this week, as I said, is Alex from the USA. She was previously on an episode in 2021 when she was living in Hamburg. That episode was called Sparkling Wine Receptions, Digitalization, WG Living, and Coming to Germany on a Scholarship. But lots has changed for Alex since I spoke to her back then. She realized she was unhappy in her job at that time, and she decided to make a move, which led her to Frankfurt. But after she got to Frankfurt and her new job there, she soon realized she'd made a mistake. And so she had to end that job during the Probezeit, during the trial period. And she has now ended up in Berlin. She learned a lot from her moves, as you can well imagine. And she came on the show to share some of her experiences and insights. And it just so happened that I was able to interview Alex face-to-face in Berlin. Now, this was cool because it was my first face-to-face interview since March 2020. I was in Berlin, as it was, for the Tempelhof Sounds Music Festival, and we were just fortunate enough to be able to fit in both of our schedules to meet up. And I'm very, very grateful that we did, because it was so great to meet Alex, and also just it's a whole different thing when I'm doing these chats in person as opposed to online. So Alex has a lot of advice for you based on her experiences. She lists the things that you must definitely ask your future employer when you're going through the interview process. She also discusses how important that job trial period is, how you can recognize a good employer, and just what she's learned about the whole interview process. And so, recorded face-to-face in Berlin, here is Alex and her story. So this is so exciting that I can do it face-to-face, because I really do prefer it to the Zoom conversations. Much more relaxed, and it's infinitely more fun. And we're sitting in Berlin. It was a bit difficult to find a place because there's all parks and everything, but there's like obnoxious birds everywhere, first of all.
And the city's very loud.
The city is loud. The city is loud, and we're not even in the main part of the city. We're in, what area is this? This is...
So this is Kreuzberg. So we're in a place called Bergmannkiez. Lots of cafes and everything. So it's super nice, but... Berlin is very loud. Beautiful, but loud.
Yeah, it is very loud.
Big and loud.
I can attest to that. It is incredibly loud. So yeah, it was, but we found this amazing little Hinterhof. So there's like a little museum and theater here. Mm-hmm. And Hinterhof is like the back courtyard, I guess you want to say. So it's
Exactly. Yeah. So, Berlin has this amazing culture of what I call the Hinterhof culture. You have a Vorderhaus, which is the frontward facing house. And then you have this courtyard that's in between. And then you go backwards and you have the Hinterhof where it's a bit quieter because the city, is loud. And, so we're just in this beautiful, lush area, which is nice for Berlin. Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't show you all of my zu verschenken as I did in the last video.
Yes.
But we took a picture, so maybe that'll give you guys a couple of impressions about where we're sitting.
Exactly. So we're going to get to that because when I interviewed you for the podcast, you were in Hamburg, and a lot has changed since then. So maybe let's get into that. Let's talk about how you got from Hamburg to Berlin, because that's actually the point of today's episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's so great to be here in person. So back, I think it was April, maybe it was 2021. It was the depths of COVID is when I call it. We were all going crazy. I was going crazy. That's probably why I had this weird outburst of showing everybody my entire room and all of these bizarre things.
I will put that in the show notes. I'll link it. I'll link it to it. The whole episode started off with Alex talking about her zu verschenken. You started off on a red phone, which is amazing. I hope you still have that.
Of course I still have the red phone. I found the red phone in Berlin. And I was drinking in the episode as well. I was drinking a Sekt. It was a Sektempfang, because that's what we were talking about. Sektempfang and Digitalisierung, or digitalization, which I can come to later. But so it was the depths of COVID. I was, working at a PR agency, working too many hours. And so I think, that led me to kind of, questioning as many people have done over the past couple of years, or through this time of like, what am I doing? Why am I working so much? Where's all of my time going? Am I really happy? And, just a disclaimer, because I think it's super, super important to talk about. I started, in German, they call it like a coaching. I got a coach, and we talked about, what am I looking for? What fulfills me, and journaled and kind of, worked through that journey as well, which is something that I've noticed is quite a big thing here, coaching. And so I started applying for all different kinds of jobs. And to be honest with you, I struggled with the thought of even applying for anything else because, the company that I worked at was my first employer in Germany. I felt very indebted to them. The German would say, die haben sich so gekümmert. They took care of my visa processes. They took care of, all of the contact with the Bundesagentur für Arbeit, so the labor agency. And, I felt very privileged to have them as an employer. However, I was, working way too much. The company didn't have a Betriebsrat, or like a workers' council. So I wasn't getting reimbursed for a lot of those things. And the more I talked to other people, the more I found out about kind of how ripped off I was getting, how I was being ripped off by the system. And so I finally, and maybe this speaks to some of the listeners here, of just, having this kind of guilty feeling of like, oh my gosh, like I can't leave because I owe them something. I owe this employer my time. They've been so good to me. Look at what they've all done. But I think that's a lie that we tell ourselves. And, it's a open market economy here. It's a free market economy. And so it's just kind of, who's offering the better thing. And so I looked for jobs. I applied for lots of jobs, had lots of interviews. If anybody has questions about, how to apply, I'm happy to, you can share my contact info as well.
Yeah, will do.
And so I applied for jobs, ended up taking a job just because I had the feeling that I needed to. It was, it was the first offer that I got, and it was slightly better than my current job. So I was like, you know what, let's go. And I ran with it. And that was probably, looking back, it was not smart, which is also why I reached out to you, and I was like, I need to tell people about these kinds of things and, how to prepare. And these are serious decisions. I think I totally underestimated what a serious decision it is to get up and move, especially in Germany. I mean, let's be honest, you even got to take your kitchen with you. And so I up and moved. I signed a contract. I got what's called an Aufhebungsvertrag.
Okay.
Which, gets you out of your 3-month-long Kündigungsfrist.
Yeah. So what's that in English? The notice period, basically.
Notice period. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, and I was like, oh my God, they're so good to me. They're so good to me. But these are things that I've, learned to ask, and I learned how to kind of, be strong to myself and stand up for myself, which I think is something that I've been learning over the years here. But so I moved within, I think, 3 weeks period. It was crazy. I, found a place to live in Frankfurt within 2 weeks. I did all kinds of digital viewings. I was super proud of myself at that time because I asked about a relocation fee.
Yeah, and you got it.
And I got the relocation fee, and
so you're feeling pretty good.
So I'm feeling pretty good.
But did you have any any reservations at that point? Like, was it just? I mean, you said you weren't that. You maybe didn't realize what a serious decision it was. Did you feel a bit afraid, or was it just a case that you were so unhappy at your previous job and so unfairly treated that it was a no-brainer?
Both. So I did have hesitations. It went super quick. They were also pressuring me, and so we can talk about the list later that I've designed for everybody. Yeah. But I felt so pressured because they were like, we want somebody to start ASAP. Well, guess what? They always want somebody to start.
Yes, ASAP. They do, don't they?
And they should also know that is not the standard here when you have the 3-month notice period. Yeah. And so honestly, I wish to myself that I would have stood up for myself and have been like, you know what? Wait for me, wait until I find a place, wait until I lived in Hamburg for 6 years. And like I said, I think, the year of resignation, we've all heard it. And so I was done with Hamburg at that point. Now I miss Hamburg. So that's a completely different story. I think it was just a mixture of too much work, kind of being burnt out.
I mean, your job does influence the way you see your surroundings and your 100%. City. So if you're unhappy in your job, it does spill over into wherever you're living and your situation.
And especially as a foreigner, because I was like, at that time, I was living in a VG. Mm-hmm. I didn't have, family partner. And so I was just like, wait, my job is the only thing that's keeping me here and I'm unhappy as well. Like, what am I doing? And you also had an episode about, making that choice to leave, which I think is also a big thing. But kind of what I wanted to talk about is how can we, ask those questions to ourselves and then ask those questions to employers as a way to avoid that. Yeah.
And something that you said about being your first job in Germany, I think a lot of the tendency is to just be so grateful that you have something. Like you just found a job in Germany, this is your ticket to stay here. And a lot of people will accept it. And I think employers know this. Not every employer is going to be like that douchebaggy or that crappy, but they know that you are a first-time employee and maybe they paid to get you there and stuff. So they know that you feel kind of obligated.
Totally.
But you don't need to feel like that. And I think that's a big lesson as well. That.
And they also, something else that I found out is, if you get your master's degree here and then they hire you as a first hire, they also get some kind of tax benefit.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So these were things that I just, I found out. I also found out about all different kinds of people leaving the company, before their contract ended, all kinds of payout things, things that just aren't really, kind of at the front of our eyes as foreigners. And so I was like, you know what? I deserve to be paid more than what I am paid. And then also learning what is a normal salary in a foreign country. And especially, wage dumping is a huge issue in Germany. Yeah. So that's kind of why I had that feeling of like, I need to go. I got this offer. The general manager was like, look, we need you as soon as possible. And so what did I say? I was like, you know what? I'll make it happen. If you help me relocate, if we get this relocation thing figured out, I'll be there. Yeah. But I wish that I would have asked that. And so I got there July 2021, moved to Frankfurt. I was just, I think, so relieved that I did that I took that big step. There was so much anxiety about moving, about leaving that comfort zone, about finding a new place, about registering, my electricity and water, silly things that you just kind of tell yourself that when you need to change, but you're like, you know what, I'm just going to stay here because it's so much easier.
Such a hassle to change. Yeah.
Yeah. And so super proud to be there, super happy to be there. And then, I loved the area. The weather is much better there than it is in Hamburg. But then when it came to my actual job, it was a disaster.
Oh my God. So you just made this huge move, which is cool. I think the cool thing is you took control of the situation, which is something that I think people need to realize they can do. They can say, I'm not happy here. I can move. You don't have to move cities. I mean, you could stay in the same city and find a new job, but Alex moved cities, I
moved cities. This job literally, and this is also maybe a life thing, is, it seemed like it was shiny and I'm just like, oh my God, this is everything. But then I get there and I notice, oh my God, we're using Outlook 2010 and we were still printing things out and putting them into folders and filing them away. And that was my job. And I was like, no.
I did not.
Yeah. What is this? The 90s? And, and digitalization is something that's near and dear to my heart. And so I'm just like, there's nothing innovative or kind of, unicorny, to use the buzzwords about this. And so I was just like, you know what? This didn't work. I had a couple of talks with management about this is not how I was imagining things. And this is also something that I encourage people to have, in your 3-month mark, to talk about, halfway through your Probezeit or your trial period. Is this we've got some birds.
Some obnoxious birds going on. They're definitely in the spring feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we had some of those conversations. They tried to appease me, but then that didn't necessarily work out. And so I started looking for other jobs. And I think just making that first step when I quit my first job, I was like, you know what? It makes it so much easier to just look and apply.
Yeah.
And then I took time with myself. I looked at, okay, I know that I'm not happy now. So I made a list of questions to ask employers. And this is something that I'd like to share with you all.
Yes, please.
And of course, this is going to depend on every person. I think my first job, I had no idea. It was my first job. I don't know what you need. I don't know. It's just like, I guess you need like money from them.
Yes.
But there's so much more than just,
there is.
There's so much more. And I was novice when it came to that. So ask them things like, and this is a no priority here, things like Weiterbildungsprogramme. What would the English be for that?
I guess training opportunities, further training, or just ways to develop yourself. Like, what are the options for further development?
Right.
Personal development.
Do they offer like coaching, for speaking or writing or for social media? All kinds of, tips and hacks and those kinds of things.
Because things like, is there a budget for it as well? Like, is there a budget?
Yeah. And this is something that my first company had, but the second company didn't have. So I was like, oh no, this is awful. Yeah. Something that we also talked about is a Schnuppertag, or kind of like
I don't know what that, like a trial day.
A trial day.
Yeah.
And I always say this, me taking this job in Frankfurt was totally a Corona decision. I didn't go to the city. I didn't see the office. I didn't meet any of the coworkers.
Yeah. So you were going in literally blind, like you had
going
not
in literally
seen
blind.
Yeah.
And so something to ask in the interview is also, hey, can I meet some of the colleagues? Can I talk to them? And I also found out afterwards that that's a very normal thing.
It is.
But I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I think that's important. And the importance of the Schnuppertag cannot be overstated, because I had it in my current job as well. When I went through the interview process, and then when they realized that they were serious and I was serious, that they suggested that I come in for a Schnuppertag. And it was literally, it wasn't a full day of work, but I was there in the morning. I spoke to all the managers, like not just my department, the other department. I did a task like I would do as if it's my normal job. Mm-hmm. It wasn't anything crazy, but just so they could see like how does he fit in? How do I ask for help if I don't know?
Yeah.
And it's so important, but it's not just important for them. It was important for me to go, my God, I want to work with this team. This team is incredible. My manager seems like a great guy. You can't tell everything from that few hours, but you get a really, really good feeling one way or another.
But you get a really good feeling. And it's also a sign of, seriousness. Are they serious about you?
Exactly.
Are you serious about them? And that way you also see silly things, but that had a big impact on the way that I worked, is technology. How are they working? How are they communicating with each other? I came from an agency where we video called everybody. And then I moved to this other job where we were still calling people on like our desk phone.
Okay.
And then also talking, this isn't necessarily, kind of a given, but, what are remote work possibilities? And what does remote mean? Does that mean Germany? Does that mean outside of the EU? And then just, kind of asking about those things. Also,
and I think also the important thing is to not be afraid to ask these things, because it is expected. So they might, in the negotiation process, they might make you feel like they're giving you a good deal and everything, but it is also 90% of the companies expect you to ask these kinds of things. So it's not such a big surprise if you ask these kinds of things.
It's not a big surprise. And I also, talking about things like the Arbeitskultur, or the work culture, not only how they work with each other, but also how they communicate with each other. And this is kind of a big difference that I had. In German, we use the Sitzen and the Dutzen, the formal you and the informal you. And at my first 2 jobs, it was informal. And then moving to this job, it was, formal. And so it's just like, okay, that's something that I'm still adjusting to, but actually that's a pretty big deal. And, I thought it was a given that, once you, through the interviewing process, it's formal. So it's Z, but then I thought once you get there, it's do, but that's not always the case.
Yeah. And that's also something you can ask. You can ask, do you Dutzen here?
Exactly.
Do you
Dutzen here? What is the situation? But also make sure you ask about things like, Sprachkursen, so language courses. That's something that I didn't know was normal. Ask them about other benefits. Do they do some kind of travel ticket for your local bus? ÖPNV, the Publix, as I call it.
The Publix.
And then ask them if they have like a Betriebsrat, so a workers' council, because that is something that I think has fundamentally changed the quality of my life, and knowing that, okay, I can only work 40 hours a week. I can only work 10 hours a day, and any time over that goes into some kind of konto, some account that I can use to abbummen, that I can use to kind of
to get to
I know.
It's like a what do you call it? Like
Freizeitausgleich.
Yeah, you can get that time back essentially.
You can get that time back, and it's
and it's all regulated. And that's the thing about the Betriebsrat or a workers' council is it's very strictly regulated. The managers know they cannot ask you to work overtime without permission, and if you do, then that time is either compensated somehow.
Right. And then it's compensated and it's taken seriously. I once worked over 10 hours without me knowing it, and I got, a very angry email. I got a very angry email from our HR department. And so, but those are important things, because at my first job, I was just, and now that I'm tracking, I was working all the time at my first job. Now that I'm tracking hours, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
How much of my time did I just give them for free?
Exactly. For nothing. Yeah.
For nothing.
And the other thing you can look at, like the smaller companies won't have a Betriebsrat. I think that there's an upper limit. There's 50 people. So the company needs to have 50 people. So if you're working for a startup or some kind of smaller company, there's still things that you can do. You can, ask them if there's a council of trust or some kind of, unofficial group of people who are looking out for the workers.
Right. And then also make sure you ask, and that's kind of what I meant about work culture, is this overtime heavy? And those are normal things to ask.
Yes,
and like I said, didn't think it was important until you're in that situation.
No, and you don't look bad if you're asking those questions. Yeah. And if you do look bad, if you're asking about the overtime and the managers interviewing you make you feel like, aren't you just going to be a hard worker or whatever, then you don't need to be at that company.
Exactly. And it's a great way to ask.
Then you're filtering.
You're filtering. Yeah. And guess what? And that is so empowering for you to be able, like, you know what? That looks like a great job, but it just doesn't really fit to me because that's not what I want. And that is such a good and important, like I said, empowering. I don't think I can say that enough, but just to know that that's okay. And you can also say no.
Yeah.
And so just a couple of other things that I had written down. Mitarbeitergespräche. So, quarterly or every half year kind of talks about your progress, what you want, as a way to develop yourself, because those were very normal things at my first job. At my second job, I had to ask them for those things. Yeah. And that was like, oh, guess what? That means that they're not concerned about my development. And that was really hard. But then I asked, at the other job in the interview process, what does this look like? I think I've already signed up, for 7 different courses at this new job, everything from learning how to deal with stress, learning how to present, learning how what agile project management is, all of design thinking. And so they do have a lot of different courses that can be offered. And also something that I want to spread the knowledge out there, because a lot of people might not know, is I think it's after you've reached the end of your Probezeit, so 6 months at the company, you can take Bildungsurlaub. Okay. And so this is, you're looking at me very confused.
No idea.
Yes. Okay. You can take Bildungsurlaub. And this is, there are different, we're in Germany, so it's a federal system. So of course we have 16 Bundesländer and we have 16 different regulations of how that work. And you have booklets that are actually even sent to the company. We're working on digitalization. And there's a list of all different kinds of Weiterbildungs, of ways that you can further your knowledge in a specific area. And this is everything from, like, one of my coworkers, and I'm so jealous of him. He went to Costa Rica and did a language course. What? Yeah. And this is steuerlich absetzbar, so it's tax refundable as well. Okay. And these are all these kinds of goodies that I love to share and spread out there, because
that's
they're
a very
important.
good tip. That's a very good tip.
Yeah, Bildungsurlaub, and I can maybe send you a link to all of that,
please.
Or we can put that
We'll put that in the show notes.
Because this is, now that COVID's over, because all that stuff was online, and that's not fun.
That's not fun. I want to go to Costa Rica.
I want to go to Costa Rica, and that's not even taken away from your official Urlaub, right? And
so it's over and above that. I had no idea that's a thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a life changer. Like I said, I'm waiting for my Probezeit to be over, and then I literally have it in my calendar. Bildungsurlaub buchen, to reserve this time. So I think asking about pay scales is also super important, because guess what? There are actually a lot of companies that work on pay scales. It's not only a public sector thing, but a lot of private sectors are moving that way, just because there is a lot of intransparency when it comes to how much people earn here in the US. I think you can Google all the time on Monster and you have a general idea, but it's not very accurate. And I also find that a lot of my coworkers, it's kind of like tiptoeing around like,
I know.
What do you earn?
Yeah.
As a way to compare.
But it's important in a lot of ways to have that kind of transparency.
Absolutely. And also about vacation days. Because, there is like a set standard, but it can also go above and beyond.
Exactly. I think the standard is something like 25, but many companies will offer 30.
Exactly. Yeah. And so those are things. And if you have kids, ask them if they have like Kinderbetreuung, childcare. That's something that a lot of people are starting to work on. And something that that is important to me, if you're thinking about having a child, ask, what is the Elternzeit question like, both for the female and for the male, or, for both ways around, to make sure that you have time. Yeah.
I love these questions because it's so, it's something that I often tell. I've said it on some of the episodes I've done about job searches before. I've also had Lisa Jans come on. She's a sort of a HR specialist that helps people with job coaching as well. And it came up there as well that you are actually looking to see if the company is a good fit. Yes. You want to impress them, because if you do like them, you want them to say, you want them to take you, but the pressure shouldn't be on that. The pressure should be on you having a look to see if you really want that company. Because basically.
it's the question of fit. Am I going to be happy here? And like you said, the fulfillment in our job is so important. So we want to make sure that's a good fit for both parties. And I think asking those kinds of questions, asking yourself what you need, is also super important. Is it impact, or is it time off? Is it purpose? Is it being able to travel with the company, for example? What does that look like?
Yeah. So another thing, we've spoken about the interview process and getting there, but what about when you get the offer? What is your experience there been?
Yeah. Biggest lesson that I've learned is to wait. They will call you.
Okay.
And they're going to give you a mündlich, a verbal offer. And as you can probably hear, I'm from America. And so I get so excited when I hear these things. Yeah. And what is my first automatic reaction? It is, oh my God, I'm so excited. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's the worst thing you can do.
That puts you in a terrible negotiation
That puts you in the worst negotiation potential ever. So guess what? This is what you do. You have the interview. You generally, if you've got a good feeling about it, make a list of on your phone, whatever, write it down, what to do when they call. And you put the first, wait, and you listen to what that offer means, what the salary is, how many vacation days they will be offering you, et cetera, because they generally, the HR department will generally offer that.
Yeah.
Don't say yes. I don't know if you know a lovely lady named Erin Meyer. She is an author and a writer, and she wrote a book called The Culture Map. And it talks about the way that a lot of people in different cultures go about decision making. And she says that, there's decisions with a small d and there's decisions with a big D. And decisions with a little d mean that we say yes. And guess what? That means we say yes to the thing, but that means that we are still flexible. We can figure it out. Yeah. And you generally very quickly come to a decision. Decisions with a big D means it takes us a very long time to get there. There are many negotiation rounds, but once we have made that decision, it's big and big, it is set.
Life-changing.
Life-changing. And I think, in Germany, you can see that through different coalition Verhandlungen or different kinds of negotiations. Yeah. It takes us a long time to get there, but once we are there, we're there. And in the US, it's like, I said yes, but guess what? That means we can change anything.
Yeah, anything.
Anything, right? And so here I am. And that is, she essentially says, Germany is a country that, makes decisions with a big D. So that means once you said something,
it's done.
It's done. Yeah. And so make sure you know that. And like I said, I did that twice.
Yeah.
I did it with my first job to Frankfurt, and I did it with my second job to Berlin. And I'm just like, I should have said, wait. Yeah. And I should have said, what, thank you so much for this offer. I need a bit to think about it. I just need to sleep on it. And then that's when you can, write an email. Wer schreibt, der bleibt. Who writes stays is one of my biggest things. Make sure all of this is written. Ask about relocation. Ask about if always, this is for everybody. If they give you a salary offer, go up.
Yeah.
See if yes.
But this is something that I think is so difficult for foreigners. This is something that's so difficult for foreigners, especially in the first role.
Especially in your first role. And guess what? I'm going to share this because I think it's vulnerable, but it's also super important. And I want people to learn out of my mistakes because I'm mad at myself. I got there the first day and I found out they had planned a significant amount more for my position.
Okay.
And so the money is there. You just need to ask for it,
right.
is what I found out. So guess what? I found that out about probably 3 times now. At the other job, I found out, anyways, they had printed everybody's salaries, you know, and I saw what everybody was making. And I was like, okay, you know what? I am the idiot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so seeing that transparency, black and white, when I saw the budget plan, when I saw, you know, what the others were earning, that empowered me to always be like, you know what? I'm going to stand up for myself and just ask, because another one of my favorite sayings, Fragen kostet nix. Asking doesn't cost.
Exactly.
It's always free, and the worst thing they can do is say no.
Yeah, and if they say no, then they say no. Like you can actually move on. You could then decide, okay, are they trying to hardball me?
Yep.
And if you really want the job, then you can consider taking it. But generally, like I think you're right. I think a lot of the companies that make you these offers, they're sort of in the middle or at the lower part of what they're budgeting for that role.
What they're budgeting for, and then they just, you know, it's not a great thing for them, but they take who bites first.
But there's also this feeling like, let's say new foreigners as well, they've also got this feeling of, I don't want to be paid that much because then there's a lot more expectations on me and it's my first job. So do you think that should be a factor at all?
I can understand where that comes from. Those thoughts I've had as well. But then, like I said, the more that I talk to other people about what they earn and how much they work, I find that foreigners generally work more.
Yeah.
I find that they work more and that they are not as sick and that they end up taking much more of that slack than the native workers.
Yeah.
That might have been a very controversial thing I just said.
It could be. I'll have to think about if I leave that in or not. But yes, I know. But I know what you're saying. But I think that you need to always go higher.
You need to always
can
go
feel
higher,
okay
and
about
you need
that.
to stand up for yourself. And when I hear what my friends, obviously the U.S. is a very different context when it comes to wages and rent and cost of living, but you deserve that. And I just want to be that voice to let you know that and stand up for yourself. And like I said, if they say no, then you can ask for other things. You can ask for maybe a little bit more time off. And like I said, the more that I've talked to people, the more that I found out they might not have gotten a raise, but they ended up getting more time off.
Yeah. Yeah. And also generally in these interview processes, they do ask you what you want to earn. And I think there as well, don't undersell yourself. Don't undersell yourself. Try and get on the high track already there.
Exactly. That was the mistake. That was the mistake that I made. I entered a number and she was like, but we're offering you so much more than you asked for. And I was like, yes, I am dumb. I have learned from this. And that's why I want to tell you all that, it's not true. Don't listen to these things. Yeah.
Okay, so you get the job. Another part of this that is an important part of the process, and I actually have Lisa Jans, I mentioned her earlier. She's coming in the next episode to talk about this as well.
Yeah.
Because I said it would be quite cool to have it after our discussion because it's about exactly this. But the Probezeit is an important part of the process for you as well.
Yes, 100%. And so, in my first job, that was also such an exciting time because I was like doing so much, had so much responsibility, and
you're working in Germany.
I was working in Germany, and I was like, I'm doing all of these things, and I had, they called it Bergfest. I think that was like my very company specific thing, and it was, halfway through the Probezeit, and it was just, meeting with my boss at that time to kind of check in and say like, okay, how do you feel like things are working here? Like, do you feel like you're a good fit? Do you feel like you are being gefordert? Do you feel like you're being, kind of pushed enough? Do you feel like that the tasks are fulfilling you? And what can we do better?
Yeah.
And then, 3 months later, then we had the final Probezeit Endgespräch or end talk. And, that went really well. And it was kind of like a very unofficial thing of like, you know what, your contract continues. And so that's a good example of, how a Probezeit should go. You feel like this is really working well. We're vibing together.
And like you said, you have that constant feedback. So it should be no surprise when you get to the end of the 6 month, what your standing is from their point of view.
Exactly.
It is, that is an important part of that Probezeit is that you're getting that feedback. If you're not getting that feedback, seek it out. It's signs of things to be worried about.
signs of things to be worried about, and I can make a direct kind of connection to that. But before I do that, also the Probezeit is a good way to talk about, okay, now that I've ended the Probezeit, how do we feel? Are you happy with my, my Leistung, kind of, what I've brought to the company, and what can we do there when it comes to finances?
Definitely. Yeah.
So that's an important negotiation part. And also, negotiation is completely normal. I just want to remind everybody of that. But that's
interesting. I just want to stop you there because I think that's important.
Yes.
And that's something that I have never done myself. But renegotiate at the end of your Probezeit. That is interesting because if you've delivered your performance and maybe overperformed and they've agreed to that in your discussions, you can say, hey, well then let's see what we can do about
Exactly. And so something that, I took my first job totally underpaid, but I was so happy to get the offer and honor, I was ecstatic.
Yeah.
And, they said, we know it's a little bit low right now, but because we're offering you at the end of the year, we had already planned. So at the end of, Q2 2021, we can give you, or 2020, we can give you a raise. And then they followed up on their word. And so that's also something that you can talk about in that negotiation thing of like, hey, I know that maybe this offer isn't what I thought it would be. Can we talk about a renegotiation if we're happy with our working relationship at the end of the Probezeit?
Yeah.
And so that's important. And then, they followed up on their word, which is also like another satisfying thing. And that's why I felt very bad leaving them because we had negotiated so many times. But if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit.
It doesn't fit. Exactly. You can't feel bad about that.
I
think it's also a lesson in there too.
You can't feel bad about that. And one of my friends who's also from the US, he's a bit older, but he wrote all different kinds of books on negotiating. So that also empowered me as well to know that it's completely normal. And a lot of these companies are used to that. So just like I said, giving that to the group. Yeah. So my other example is what happens when the Probezeit goes bad. You ask for feedback, and I had this feeling that they were very confused about me asking.
Okay.
And they didn't really have
alarm bells.
Alarm bells, exactly. And there was also no HR department.
God.
Yeah, exactly. So like I said, important things to ask. And at my previous job, I worked closely with our people and culture. So here's a linguistic kind of difference. People and culture means that the company is, interested in topics regarding diversity, equity, inclusion. Yeah. They're kind of, I guess international in that sense. So if that's what you're looking for, if you see the words people and culture, your heart should start beating faster. Know that that's like, that's kind of the innovative place that I want to work.
Yeah.
And if they don't have an HR department, which is something that I didn't even think to ask because that is such a basic. I just assume
that every company has an HR department.
Yeah, they didn't. And so, like I said, and add it to the list of things to ask, HR department, support from HR department. And I didn't ask. And so I was like, okay, so when am I going to get the invite for the end of my Bergfest, 3 months through my Probezeit? And they're like, oh yeah, we don't really do that. And so I had to, I had a meeting essentially that I set up myself, whatever, I'm fine, I can do that, strong enough to do that. And I told them kind of about a lot of the issues that I was having, a lot of the concerns that I was having, and noticing that I wasn't necessarily as happy as I thought I was going to be there. And they essentially told me, well, this is the position, this is all we can offer you. This is the position. It's a very static thing. We can't do a lot of negotiation here. And so that was kind of the sign where I was like, and that happens in a lot of smaller companies. It was a lot smaller than I thought it was on the website. It looked like it was 200 Mitarbeiter workers and all of these things. And that's kind of why the Schnuppertag is so important.
Yes.
And I got there and I was like, oh no, this is not going well. And so once that kind of happened, I think you feel that in your gut, you feel it in your heart. And it's like, okay, then maybe we start to look at other options because I quit when I was 5 months through. So I didn't even end my Probezeit, which, I moved to 2 different cities and that's how I ended up in Berlin. And for a German, this is like unthinkable. You know, I've moved so much and they're just like, good Lord. And so it went wrong, but what I've heard from so many people and the feedback that I've gotten from the people in my new position is, guess what? That's totally fine because that's what a Probezeit is for.
Yes.
It can go wrong, and it's better that you cut that now than later.
Yeah. Don't have to feel any kind of obligation to stay or whatever. If it's not working out for you, don't work out. And I've seen so many situations go badly because you kind of think, okay, well, it's just been 6 months. Things probably get better. Maybe you get some promises from them, and then they stay on, and then you're even more stuck depending on your notice period that you have to give, and it just gets rather cut your losses.
Yep.
and get out when you can.
And cut the losses, because that is what, everybody wants, somebody who can start right away. And because I was still in my pulpit side, I had a 2-week notice. And that kind of was, my saving grace, so to say, because I was able to just pack up and leave.
Yes. You can do it pretty quickly. It's a few weeks and then you're done.
Yep. Yeah. And you just ask them, and guess what? And that's just a very professional thing. You have to say, look, it wasn't working for me, and that's okay. And just knowing your worth.
Exactly. Know your worth. And another thing I want to ask you is, like, with that, how do you sell that to another company then when you're going, because you know that they're going to look and maybe see that you had 2 probe sites that didn't work out. Oh my God.
We've got
on a Sunday. There is something happening here. They're doing some kind of work, but I think it should be fine. What was my question to you? Oh yeah. So you've had these 2 prototypes that didn't work out, maybe.
Yeah.
And you go to your new company. How do you sell that? Like, what did you say?
But also super important, because I had to sell that, and that's a good point. I had to sell it in the interview. Mm-hmm. And they were like, okay, like, we've noticed that you just started a new job. What's going on? And there, it was full transparency. It was, look, I made this move because I thought it was something completely different, and then I got there and it wasn't. And guess what? I'm looking for something much bigger, and I'm looking for something with much more impact, which is what I do now. And they respected that. They were like, okay, you know what? And then that was even, more kind of settling to me. They go, you know what? Das därför die Probezeit da. And that's literally what they said in the interview.
That's what the
because they're going to ask. And if they don't ask, it's also weird. But it's also, like I said, I noticed pretty quick, and that's what I told them. I go, look, I had like a pretty good feeling that it wasn't going to work out, that I wasn't fulfilled here. And that was actually like very warmly received. So
and
don't
that's a good
worry.
sign as well.
And that's a good sign. And they were like, you know what? I respect that.
Yeah.
That's what they said.
And I think that's the one thing that I learned in my job searches in Germany, is that at any point, even if you're new, even if you've been here for a few years, that honesty is a big deal. Because if you open yourself up to them and tell them what the situation is or what you're looking for. The last job that I got, I was so not desperate for it. I had a job that I was happy with.
Yeah.
I had another job offer as well. And then this one was more in line with what I wanted to do. I would have to take a pay cut, but I was fine because I knew I was new to marketing and everything.
Right.
But I thought I could be more fulfilled in that job. But I was also not desperate if I didn't get it. And I walked in and I've never been more honest in a thing. I'm like, I really think I could fill this role, but I can't prove it to you because I've never done this before.
Yeah.
And it was great and I think that got me on a good start off with my manager as well. We had this honesty right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I can say is definitely just be honest. And like you were saying, just tell them what the situation was. If you have a hole in your CV that there's there for a reason, tell them the reason.
And I think Germans, this is very stereotypical, but they really do appreciate honesty.
Yes, they do.
They want that, because it also is going to say what kind of worker you are. Are you going to be honest with them when there's an issue, when there's something going on? And this is something that I hear from my boss all the time. He's like, Frau Swanson, whenever there's an issue, just let me know. And they need that feedback. Yeah.
And I guess it also shows something about you. Like, you were willing to go and get what you want and make sure that you're and that also shows some character.
And then I guess this is just more empowerment and kind of motivation for you all. Find out what you want and go and get it, and you can do that, and you don't have to be in an unfulfilled job here, because there are so many open positions.
Yes.
And if there's any way that I can help, I can give you my contact info, and you can put it in the disclaimer thing. But super happy to help out, because it makes quality of life here so much better, and I'm so much happier now that I've moved and have a new job.
Yeah, and your new job is pretty cool. Maybe you just want to tell. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, for sure. So I work at the Bundesverband der Deutschen Industrie, which is the Federation of German Industry. It is the large umbrella organization for about 40 German organizations, everything from the automobile industry, telecommunications industry, metal industry. Now that I hear the construction in the background,
that's what you call topical.
That's what you call topical, yeah. And, but what I do is I am essentially what I call a female lobbyist. I'm a Frauenlobbyist. And so I lead a initiative there that's called She Transforms IT. And the last topic I talked about, digitalization, or the lack of it in Germany. And so I work in the digitalization innovation department, and there we work on how to make digitalization stronger in Germany, but more specifically, we look at how can we make female leaders in Germany that have a IT digitalization background or job, how can we make them more visible, but also how can we encourage more people to get into these jobs? So a lot of it is working on different programs and initiatives as a way to make sure that computer science is being taught in Germany. There's only one school that has what we call Pflichtfach Informatik, which is mandatory computer science in all classes, and that is Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. Surprise.
That's astounding.
It's astounding.
I don't know.
Exactly.
Maybe it isn't. Knowing Germany,
no, it's
maybe it's
complete.
not.
Yeah, but these are things, when we talk about it from an economic standpoint, if Germany wants to be, the leader when it comes to industry, then digitalization and innovation is a huge part of it. And so I get to work on the future of Germany every day, and that's super exciting. And it's really cool. So like I said, a lot of it is, kind of figuring out what I want from a job, what I need from a job. And it takes a while. And it takes so many no's, and it takes so many applications, and it takes so many interviews and so many letdowns. But I know that, maybe this is the naive positivity in me that it will work out and that you can do that. So that's a little bit about what I do now.
And I think I know I have a lot of women podcast listeners from international backgrounds. I'll put your LinkedIn
please do
in the show notes as well, and people should get in touch with you and just talk to you about these topics. So I think it's amazing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's very cool.
We currently have 17% of women in IT in Germany, and this is just not acceptable. 17. And so this is something that we always say a digital location like Germany cannot afford, but also from an equality standpoint, this is just not acceptable. So we're working on that.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, a lot of work to do there, yes. So if you have ideas, let me know.
Okay.
I need them.
Yeah. But like I said, just we'll put your details, and people need to get in contact with you and talk to you about it. And Alex likes to talk.
Love to talk. So if you want to talk to me, reach out.
Alex. So to wrap up our discussion, what's your advice for working in Germany? Now that you've experienced several offices that you've been in and
I can give advice when it comes to working with the coworkers, because I think that is the biggest thing that is going to make a difference in your life, because if you ask somebody to do something, you want to have a good relationship with them, because a lot of times they'll just tell you no, and it's like there's no reason. So I've got 3 tips. Always say hello.
Okay.
It sounds very bizarre. If you're in the Teeküche, if you're, in the little kitchen, make sure you acknowledge their presence. I'm not sure if any of you have noticed this. Germans speak with their eyes. Say hello, do an eye blink, and nod a little bit forward.
I wish people could see your eye blink.
I wish you could see this. I wish you could see this, but this is a thing. And if you, and always acknowledge their presence.
Yes, I think that's a very good thing. Despite it being notorious for being closed and everything in the workplace, it's important to just greet. You don't have to have a chat.
Just greet. And if it's the morning, guten Morgen.
Yeah, guten Morgen. If it's
Tag.
Lunchtime, Mahlzeit.
I hear Mahlzeit all the time, which leads me to my next one. Okay. If you are in the cantina or the cafeteria and if you see a coworker and you do not tell them guten Appetit or Mahlzeit, you have committed some kind of crime.
It's a cardinal sin in Germany.
It is and then, you can say, you can close your eyes and kind of, nick your head, tilt your head a little bit. So that way it's, but then you can also, just say hi if you wave your hand really briefly and then, nod.
You've got this down, Alex.
Oh
I'm amazed. People can't see this because it's audio only, but Alex is doing these movements, and it's exactly how they do it.
That's exactly how they do it. And I was like, oh my God. Okay. Yeah. So if I don't say hello, then I am dead to them, literally. And they have already killed me. Okay. And then the last one is if you need, if you're standing in line to maybe get water, I don't know, or you notice there's some kind of awkward silence. What is the best thing to ask somebody when they have their next vacation planned, or how their vacation was? Yes. And all of a sudden they just light up like a light bulb.
This is such great advice. I can't even tell you, Alex, you're nailing this advice. It is so true.
It's so true. Yeah. And I remembered, because there's this lady, she has an administrative job, and so I generally need a lot for my project. She does a lot of processing for us, and so I was like, you know what, we need to be friends. It was clear for me from day one. I was strategic about it.
Yeah.
She told me she was going on the Jakobsweg, which is a long hike, and and afterwards I go, oh, how was the Jakobsweg? And she just went on and on and on, and that just made her so happy. But it's also a cool way to connect.
It is a very cool
way. It's a cool way to connect.
Good way to connect.
And I don't mean to be facetious, but it's a cool way to connect. And then they'll ask you, and then it's also nice to kind of talk about what you've got planned as well.
Yeah. And I think it also shows it gives you a bit of an insight into their, like, what interests them, what kind of things do they like, beach holidays.
Yeah.
It's important. It's like, it doesn't sound important, but it's important to just kind of get the basis of that. And that's what you get. I think this is brilliant. I think that is brilliant advice. Ask about their vacation that's coming up or that they've just had.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Exactly, because we all know they've at least just had one or something's coming up.
They always had something planned or they've just had one. Vor dem Urlaub ist nach dem Urlaub.
Vor dem Urlaub, nach dem Urlaub. Yes.
Which means before the vacation. What? After the vacation is before the
vacation.
Yeah. Yes. Cool.
That's all I've got, though. I hope it was helpful.
This was so much. This was incredible. This is going to be
fun.
It is so much fun, and like I said, it's so much fun to do this face to face and in Berlin.
This
is really.
You got
cool.
all the sounds. I hope everybody got all the sounds.
I got birds. We got people in the background laughing now, and it's been a lot of fun. And thank you so much for making the time to come and be on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for everything you do.
All right, that's it for this week. As I mentioned, next week, Lisa Jans of Job Coach Germany will be on the podcast to talk about the first 6 months, and we will be covering similar things to what Alex was talking about, how important that trial period is, and what kind of things you need to ask yourself during your first 6 months trial period at a new job in Germany. That's coming up next week. Music in this episode by my band 10 Cent Janes, additional music by Ryan Anderson until the end. This is the end. I'll speak to you next week. Auf Wiederhören.